So I will talk in English. Please don't mind, because I have also an international audience, if not exactly right now, but maybe in the future. Because I will send this recording to other people as well. So Gian Lorenzo Bernini, a giant in art, in painting, in drawing, in sculpture, in architecture. Born December 7th, 1598. He lived a long life. Michelangelo as well. Leonardo lived less, and Raphael even less. But then Raphael apparently was a very devoted lover, so apparently he was consumed by the fire of his romantic life, some people say. Anyway, Bernini, he was beautiful as a man. I mean, this is a self-portrait, and somehow I think a little bit of Lucian, our painter. Lucian didn't have a mustache and that chic thing under his lower lip, but uh, I like his paleness, his being thin, and he looks romantic. And it's possible I idealize him. There are other portraits of him, and you are going to see him in other representations. But we are dealing here with a major force of the Roman Baroque, the Baroque of Rome, where all the roads at least once led. Uh, so, if this doesn't inspire us, if Bernini doesn't inspire us at all levels, I don't know who could. He's not the only one, but there are very few of his stature in the world of art. A drawing, he drew well, he painted well, he sculpted well. I also like this picture of him in older age. You can tell a sensitive man, an intense man, an introverted man, but also a man who was able to negotiate with, popes and clients much better than his adversary in a way, Borromini, the other great Baroque architect, who unfortunately was much more idiosyncratic and difficult. And so here we have two different human types. Bernini, a gentleman, a man with, I imagine, abilities for dialogue with the others. Borromini, on the other hand, extremely difficult, and he committed also suicide at 67 or 68. Some say because of his enmity with the gentleman in front of you, with Bernini. Who knows? Here he is as a dignified older man, maybe a little bit too dignified. Jesus, he doesn't look like a tormented artist at all, but maybe he was not a tormented artist, but he was a great artist. Drawings, a few drawings. This presentation doesn't really do enough justice to Bernini. I have about 150 pictures. It's an introduction to Bernini and no more. But through this introduction, I hope we gain something in our quest for Bernini in a way. He was indeed provoking the matter of art to a certain level of fluidity and dynamism that was not often known in the past. And this differentiates, Baroque art from the previous form of art. He was not the only Baroque artist. In a way, Borromini was somehow, no, but I'm not saying the correct thing. On the other hand, Borromini was not a sculptor as Bernini was. So mainly Bernini probably considered himself a sculptor, but he also, of course, drew, painted, made sculptures, built some beautiful and significant fountains in Rome, and you are going to see them. And he also built a few buildings, although some buildings that he contributed to were done in conjunction with a few other architects. Maderno, Carlo Fontane, and even Borromini will arrive there. But look at his drawing. You know, but those people at that time, they knew how to draw. You know, most of them, the good ones, knew very well how to draw, and the drawing was part of everything they did: painting, sculpture, architecture. I know I idealize, I know that, but I long for a time again when there is greatness, when there is not an arrogant greatness, but a cultured greatness. You know, maybe the word greatness is not appropriate because it has, you know, maybe inflated connotations. But I'm talking about a more cultured and sensitive time when we have different interests than the banalities we are so concerned with most of the time. Paintings, a few paintings. Now, how many architects today would paint like this? You know, I don't think too many. But it's true, we live in a different time. If at least we would paint like Picasso. Hello, Francesca. I think Picasso, that's why I launched that call for, Picasso architecture. Because if we could inspire ourselves from the incredible vitality and variety of Picasso's visions, I think our architecture would be equally provocative and full of nerve, of verve, of an intensity and the color and you know, even primitivism, but sophisticated primitivism, if I can use this oxymoron. But now, why should we inspire ourselves from such a minor artist as Picasso? Anyway, back to Bernini. I almost said Borromini. Interesting that these two artists were, you know, competitors at that time in Rome, Borromini and Bernini. Okay, so these are just a few images with his paintings. Just this section deserves an amplification. Now, sculpture. He was the ultimate sculptor, one of the greatest sculptors ever in the world, Borromini. And I mean, look at this head, you know, done in stone. This is in stone, you know, it's not anything else but stone. Everything is in stone. Look what is here, you know, it's a celebration of life and of Bacchus and of grapes and of birth and of Dionysus and of love. It's about passion, it's about dedication, it's about intoxication, as it should be. The lion, of course, the lion couldn't miss the party. The lion is important because the lion is that second stage in the three transformations that Nietzsche talked about, that the camel, the slave par excellence, wants to become. I said this before and I will say it again, that Nietzsche identified three transformations in one's life. First, the camel, because you have to carry a lot of weight on your back to learn. And then at one moment, the camel says, to hell with the luggage, to hell with the weight. I want to become a lion, to have power, to be strong, to be the king of or the queen of the forest. So the camel becomes a lion. But after a while, the lion is unhappy because he or she has power, but doesn't have the joy that creativity brings in. That's why the third transformation is from the lion into a child, because only the child who loses himself or herself in his or her play is truly creative. So from camel to lion, from lion to child. I think the intuition of Nietzsche is correct. Back to Bernini, where you have, you know, great movement, because this is what the Baroque art is about. And you even have maybe an angry, or looks like an angry dog. Or is it not a dog? Who knows? Some kind of mythical animal with the head of a dog. I don't know enough mythology. And yeah, I mean, look at this David. You know, the small man vis-a-vis the big man. You know, the man who has wisdom and I mean has intelligence opposing Goliath, who was much stronger. But David wins, and David wins because he thinks, and he's also courageous, which sometimes people who think are not, and vice versa. Anyway, I like that. I like the movement of the body. You know, it shows, total concentration and great involvement. You know, with what he was doing. He was supposed to defeat the monster, the giant. Bravo, David, you succeeded. And so did you. Bernini, this is Teresa, will arrive in more detail at this statuary, which is very important in the work of Bernini. I mean, look at this. You know, you could almost say it is flesh and it is stone. It is unbelievable. I mean, you know, the rock, the stone became soft flesh. This is magic. I mean, it is magic. Incredible, absolutely incredible. He transformed the stone into flesh. Medusa, hello Medusa, how are you today? Anyway, look at these snakes, you know, just the snakes in themselves and are a great work of art. Fountains, great fountains in Rome by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Fontana del Tritone, Rome. Look at the banality of the building behind, but the sculpture is not, the statue is not, the fountain is not banal. And the joy of having water springing, and even if it's not a giant thing, but it is a celebration of life, of the forces of life, and water always helps. You know, that banal building behind is called Bernini. It's probably some kind of a hotel. Anyway, we see here fish and you know, maybe a bee there or several bees. And the bees also show up in the works of Borromini. Very nice. Tritone. And look at this beautiful picture with the water falling on the statue that is you know, around 400 years old, or maybe just a little bit less. Now the famous fountain of the Four Rivers in Rome, in Piazza Navona. Look at this, you know. It's magic again. You know, what did Bernini feel when he carved these stones? You know, he probably felt great, meaning he felt alive, and he felt love for life, and he probably also suffered, because you cannot really separate. Somehow they go together. Maybe that's why Nietzsche said that. You know, the human beings are the most entitled. They are the only animals that laugh. And they laugh because they are the only ones who suffered enough in order to be entitled to laugh. I like this. It is kind of true. At the end of a lot of suffering, there is a laughter that no animal knows except the humans. Anyway, what can we say? You know, it is greatness. It is greatness. Doesn't matter how you look at it, where you look at it from, it is greatness. It is a narrative sculpture or statue or statuary grouping, but it's also somehow abstract because it moves beyond the mere narration. It's really alive. The stone is singing. That's what I think, if you allow me to be a little bit exalted. And I like this conjunction between animals and the humans and the water. It's just, if you die in the proximity of this fountain, I don't imagine being too, saddened, but because you die in the proximity of eternity, really, of eternal life, actually, not eternal death. Anyway, enough with the exaltation, enough, but how could I say enough when there is so much beauty here? The Fountain of the Moor in Rome. And look, you know, what can we say? These statues are much more alive than many of my contemporaries. This is my feeling. I mean, these stones are more alive. I should invite them maybe for tomorrow to some of my presentations, and they will probably show up. Yeah, but I don't know the email address. That's the problem. I'll try to find it out. Or if you find it out, please be kind and let me know. Hello, Mauro. The Elephant and the Obelisk, another statuary work important by Bernini. I once did propose myself an elephant, but not in Rome, a statue that is in New York City with a golden egg on a little table on its back. But here we have not a golden egg on a small table, but a whole obelisk. Well, apparently he did the drawings for this, but it was carved actually by someone else based on the instructions of Bernini. So it is considered his work. Now, architecture. Here, there are some problems because he didn't, only sometimes he worked alone, very few times. Most of the time he worked with other architects, very important architects. We begin with St. Peter's Square in Rome, the well-known square in Rome. That square where Leo Krier, the lover of the past, proposed there a triangular, huge swimming pool right in front of San Pietro. So the architect of Prince Charles, a traditionalist and a famous traditionalist at that, Leo Krier, proposed right here in this plaza designed by Bernini, a triangular, a huge urban triangular swimming pool, in some kind of provocation to San Pietro, I imagine. Anyway, actually the Baroque architecture of Bernini is not as Baroque as it could have been, and it is not as Baroque as that of Borromini. There is some kind of Baroque architecture which is not too far away from what we call classical architecture. But so what I'm trying to say is that in architecture, as opposed to his fountains and his sculptures, he's rather a little bit subdued, with the exception of the baldachin within the San Pietro, which we are going to see, and some other parts. But you'll see an architecture by him that at times is very close to being what is called classical. But he did this colonnade, the famous colonnade in front of San Pietro. This is the work of Bernini, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. And now we arrive at an important work. And in one of my messages today, I showed the ceiling of this church, Sant'Andrea al Quirinale, which is on Via 20 Settembre, the 20th of September in Rome. Is this ceiling here? This is not the best picture. I found others, but anyway, this is a church he built himself, and it's a fine church, and it is, if I can say so, discreetly Baroque. The facade, of course, it is an oxymoron. How could you be Baroque and at the same time discreet? It's not very easy. I agree. I mean, with a few details or ornaments. The facade is, moderately Baroque. Maybe even Pietro da Cortona is a little more Baroque than Bernini. But it's a fine building, and it shows his skill in building, in as much as we saw his skill in sculpture, in painting, in drawing. Now the ellipse, of course, is very loved by the Baroque artists. What would the Baroque be without ellipses? Where you have that love affair between two circles. So the ellipse has two centers, and that complicates matters, but that adds dynamism to the composition, to the building, if we are to talk about buildings. And some details here, like you see on the right, there indeed we have a Baroque fully blown, fully developed. Essentially, I would say Bernini was a sculptor, but was a sculptor who practiced the other arts just as Michelangelo did, just as Leonardo did. Well, Leonardo didn't build much. He didn't build almost anything. Leonardo was really the genius amateur in a way. But Michelangelo in architecture and even in painting, I would say he was kind of an amateur, in the sense that he was, just like Bernini, mainly a sculptor, or firstly a sculptor. I know it is almost unacceptable. It sounds almost unacceptable to say that Michelangelo was an amateur, but what I mean is that, he was not a so-called professional painter. He was able to paint, of course, but if you had love for painting and you knew how to do it, it didn't mean you were so-called professional as we have today. And Leonardo was not a professional in anything, but they were all unbelievably talented and intense and maybe even wise to an extent, with the exception of Raphael. Although the paintings of Raphael maybe are the most wise out of the other two I mentioned. Anyway, Baroque and Baroque again. What made these artists to climb up there and create those sculptures, for what? Well, it was this longing, this aspiration for the beyond. Call it whatever you want to call it. It is an aspiration we do not have today. We make parking lots, we make shopping malls, we make all kinds of things. But this kind of aspiration for the beyond, for the infinite, for the absolute, or for God, we do not have. Something happened to our world, I think. I mean, look at those beings, they are all like in a frenzy, trying to go higher and higher and higher. The Baldacchino in St. Peter, which is his work, and I hope I have here a picture of just one, which is so similar to a skyscraper that Ma Yansong from Med Architects built in Canada. I'm talking about this, but there are better pictures. I hope I have one of them. Anyway, and he did it without parametric design, without the help of the technology that we have today. And it's huge. Look at it. If you consider the size, the height of the human beings. This is a huge space, and yeah, it deserved a little amplified presentation, and I apologize. But today, you can find anything by yourself on the web. This is just a provocation, an invitation. Palazzo Barberini, where he worked with Maderno and Borromini. Actually, Maderno and Borromini started the building. Borromini being, I think, the nephew of Maderno, if I understood well. And then later on, Bernini was hired for the job because of some changes. The Pope was changed or something like this. So Bernini didn't start the building, but he finished it. And the facade also belongs to him. So again, what we see is a kind of a moderate Baroque. It's not wild at all. Here there are two very famous staircases, one by Bernini, one by Borromini, and you are going to see them. And you can actually, contemplating those two stairs, you can realize the difference between the two architects. The Scalone del Bernini, that's it. So this is the staircase that Bernini designed, which is not based on an oval or a circle, but it's rather rectangular, but it still has the circular movement. So this is Bernini. And I don't know who did this ceiling. I should have known, but I don't. But it does look impressive, even in this imperfect picture, for which I apologize. It's a very rich palace, Palazzo Barberini, and it deserves a presentation just itself. Here you see the two stairs. The one at the bottom is Bernini. The one at the top is Borromini. And I will end the short presentation about Palazzo Barberini with two pictures. One of the staircase by Bernini, which is here, and the next one is the one by Borromini, which is this one. They are both very famous and very important for the history of architecture and art in the Baroque times. Now, Palazzo Montecitorio, which was completed by Carlo Fontana, a palazzo is indeed, it's an administrative building now for the political elite in Rome. I don't know exactly, but some kind of a chamber for. It is an important political building, and he was involved in the making of this building. Okay, another obelisk. The West loved obelisks, although they didn't originate in Europe, but somehow there was a fascination with obelisks. And there is an obelisk even in Place de la Concorde in Paris, that stupid obelisk that Georges Bataille wrote about, and after him, professor of French at Yale, who published a provocative book, which I can lend to you if you are interested in, with an impossible title, Against Architecture. Against Architecture, the writings of Georges Bataille. Denis Hollier wrote that book, a professor of French at Yale. Anyway, this is the back, the rear of the building that we just saw the front of. Now the Santa Bibiana church, the main facade, a small so-called modest church. This was one of his first works, architectural works, and he worked on it when he was also working on the baldachin within San Pietro that you saw. I like these small churches, more the periphery in a way, in the proximity of a tree, far away from the noise of the cars and motorcycles. There are so many motorcycles in Rome and in Italy in general. Too many, I would say. San Tommaso da Villanova in Castel Gandolfo, another church by him. You see, it is quite, if unadorned with sculptures, you would, with some difficulty, consider it a Baroque building. And you'll see another one, which is almost like as if envisioned and built by Claude Nicolas Ledoux, the neoclassical architect. Even within, it's not, an architectural intoxication. It's not that Baroque that makes you a little bit nervous, so to speak. Anyway, it's a smaller church. Now this one, Santa Maria Assunta from Aricia, look at it. This is what I was referring to when I was mentioning Claude Nicolas Ledoux. you know, it's almost classical or neoclassical. But Bernini is considered a Baroque artist, architect, and so on, through and through. It's an interesting building, especially when you know, when you find out that it was actually built by Bernini. If I didn't know it was by Bernini, I would have had difficulties to associate his name with this building. But it is by Bernini. Now, inside is a different story. It's true. Here there are some embroideries, architectural embroideries, which could be considered uh, Baroque, although gone is the ellipse, is just a circle, and the circle is somehow too static to represent that spiral motif that, you know, is about processuality or becoming. Because in a way, classical art or classical architecture is about being, and Baroque art or architecture is about becoming. One is about the circle, the other one is about the spiral or the ellipse. Now we look at this very important statuary work, which is at Santa Maria della Vittoria in Rome, Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, in this chapel, Cornaro Chapel. And I once met online, I would say, an almost crazy Russian artist who was living in Paris, who wanted to represent, uh, you know, the wife of what's the name? Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, as Mother Teresa. Now, I don't know very well why he was against. Of course, he was against Hillary Clinton. Maybe he actually liked her. Maybe he was attracted to her, because sometimes, you know, we have these through reverse psychology. We have these conflictual desires. You know, we love what we hate, and we love and we hate what we love. Anyway, this is a supreme you know, artwork in the field of the Baroque art. Look at the angel, at the cubid. Look at the expression. You know, it's almost, I don't know. You know, anyone who knows a little bit about love and its sufferings would appreciate the smile of this, you know, celestial being. You know, we're having some kind of a compassion, because that arrow that you see on the left, you know, is penetrating your soul, and the sufferings are almost unavoidable. So, you know, this gentle smile is probably necessary and very welcomed. But what kind of an ecstasy Saint Teresa had, you know, was not of an erotical nature, but or it was, but it was about a celestial, you know, coming together, so to speak, and so it was a spiritual love, but somehow the Bernini biologized it a little bit. You know, it's there is an erotism here that is obvious. Anyway. It is one of the great works from the Baroque era, and you know, in this Bernini, you know, is the equal of the greatest. It's not the only work he did that is to be placed so high, but it is one of those. Now, yes, because just like in the Middle Ages, the artists didn't neglect the other side, you know, the so-called dark side. You know, in the hourglass of existence, you cannot neglect death. Sooner or later, it strikes. And somehow, when you bring in proximity the sublime of art, with a finality of death, they enhance each other, perhaps. Bernini and the art of fluid deformation. Well, any fluidity, could be approximated as bringing in a certain level of deformation. And this is probably the last picture of this incipient presentation on this great, truly great and complex artist. If you look at this fluid deformation, you would say if there was no figurative, nothing figurative in it, you would say this belongs to our time. But no, and it was done without Maya, without scripting and programming. It was done exclusively in an analog way. Okay, thank you. Now we go to the Czech architect, of whom I knew absolutely nothing yesterday, but I'm very happy I discovered him today. Well, he also had some, of course he had, maybe everything that is great in art has to have some connection with Italy. I don't know. But this very interesting architect deserves study, I think. He died young though, as opposed to Bernini, who died at 82, he died at 46. So that's how life is. I don't know how to pronounce his name, his last name. I know how to pronounce his second name, which is the connection with Italy, Santini. I'm not sure. Somehow I don't have the feeling that this is a man from the beginning of the 18th century, but maybe he was. It's the only picture of him I found on the web. So he died in 1723, almost 300 years ago. And you see, this picture apparently represents him, but I don't know. Anyway, so he was a Czech architect of Italian descent whose major works represent the unique Baroque Gothic style, the special combination of the Baroque and Gothic styles. And this has a certain appeal to me because I was born in Sibiu, and in Sibiu in Transylvania also there are Baroque and Gothic elements kind of coming together, coexisting. It's not easy to bring together the Baroque with the Gothic, but apparently he did it. You'll see the Church of St. John of, you read it, Nepomuk. I'm sure I don't pronounce it well. It doesn't sound right somehow. This was the architect, and it was from 1719. So I'll read a little bit of text here. The pilgrimage church of St. John near the monastery in Ghdar was built thanks to the long time, close and immensely fruitful cooperation of two extraordinary people. The impulse was given by the gentleman, an abbot of the Cistercian monastery Ghdar, who was a proven devotee of John of Nepomuk before he was beatified as well as after he was canonized. The preparation of the project dates back to the period from the late April to the beginning of August 1719 and is considered a direct reaction of the abbot to the discovery of preserved tissue in the tomb of John of Nepomuk. I don't know who John of Nepomuk is, in the St. Vitus Cathedral in 1719. The design of the building was entrusted to famous architect Jan Blajek Santini Aichel, to whom Abbot Veimluva is alleged to have presented his ideas about the new sanctuary and the symbols used, which was fully compliant with the requirement of the church. And I love this. Fathers propose, artists create, something the church in Romania does not understand. And it is unacceptable that they don't understand. The fathers could propose, but the artists create. So the architect then worked on the basis of the outline. Santini dealt with the project quite individually, without any respect to the traditions concerning the shapes of religious buildings. He only accepted the contemporary viewpoint of the structure of a pilgrimage destination. Great again, because this is what a true artist does. And this is written on the facade of the Secession building in Vienna, where Olbrich added to the building this clearly stated motto: to each time its art, and to art its freedom. So any great artist from any time understands that his or her art has to belong to the time he or she lives in. Also, what is very interesting here, that it was mentioned the extraordinary meeting between two people. This also happened with Le Corbusier and um, that priest he was rather friends with. Because of their meeting, um, we have Ronchamp, we have La Tourette, and we even have San Pietro. And not San Pietro, how is it called? Well, it is the St. Peter's Church in Firminy-Vert. But what I mean is that it is important to have someone, a father or whatever, father of the church, who understands, in this case, contemporary art. In our case, also contemporary art. Otherwise, we are condemned to, repeating some dogmas from the past. Anyway, the architect melted the abbot's idea of the church, in which the main role was to be played by the pattern of a star, into an extraordinarily impressive form, which was only appreciated by the modern time, yet not always. This person, Friedrich Radnitsky, a member of the Central Committee, referred to the church as a visually mysterious phenomenon as late as 1886. This is the last text. The project was finished unusually quickly, but this was nothing exceptional for Santini. Moreover, the abbot and the architect had cooperated together for many years, and they were both specialists on symbology, and the teaching of the Kabbalah. Can you believe it? Because we are dealing here with a Christian church. But the Kabbalah is mentioned, which they used to a substantial extent in the project. Santini knew very well what the abbot wanted from him. Thus, the resulting architecture must have been affected positively by the atmosphere of mutual understanding. The definitive shape of the building does not differ much from the first design, and only a few changes were made. This is can you believe it? Kepler probably would have laughed it too. This is cosmic art. This is an art and an architecture that communicates not just with the earth and the people around it, but also with cosmos, with what is beyond the earth. It's an enclosed, citadel in a way, and in the middle is the church, and then what you see around it is, look at it, from space. It's beautifully abstract, and it's also Baroque. But he also used the triangle in a way which could be associated more with the Gothic than because the Baroque is more about fluidity, and it's very hard to imagine the triangle as being too fluid. Anyway, another great picture of the same thing, and this is in a country not far away from ours. And yes, around the church there are graves scattered around the church. And the church has 5 bulbs, so to speak, and bulbs, the word is not correct, sorry. You understand, you see them there. It's a very interesting church, and it's a very interesting architectural situation, if I am to describe it in this way. It is the same joy of connecting the earth with the sky, that's why it is an art, an architecture that is not just terrestrial. It doesn't belong just to the earth, just as some works we have seen in the case of Bernini. It's about aspiration towards something else and some kind of order. I cannot say cosmic order because the word cosmos in Greek means order, but there is, I don't know the intricacies of the connection with the Kabbalah, but it's also interesting. This is beyond Christianity. This is closer to some kind of mysticism without frontiers, if I can call it so. It is an esoteric building to an extent. Nice. Nice during the summer, nice during the winter. And who cares, you know, that, I mean, we do care, of course, but are these people really dead? Somehow they contribute to the celestial music that the architecture created the basis for here. And look on the ceilings, you know, it's the motif of the star that you wouldn't really say it's a Christian motif. And I don't know, I find it moving that this building has these references, formal references to a form of spirituality that transcends really Christianity. It's a fine building and it's a fine ensemble. And this is also a fine photograph. He is a master of parapets. You'll see in another building very filigrammed parapets or a parapet for a elliptical stair. It is there that he manifests his Baroque tendencies. He is truly a very interesting architect. I plan to study him further, maybe for the next year presentation, if there will be one. Now, the monastery church of the Assumption of Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist in this place, Kutne Hori, it was a reconstruction, is a World Heritage Site, and is quite, you know, ample. It's big, it's very luminous. And look at that glorious ceiling. Look at the architectural foliage. Structural and ornamental at the same time, as it should be. St. Anna Chapel in this place that you read. Here is the plan. They are very well kept, these buildings. I have to say it. It means the Czechs know how to take care of their buildings. Sorry about Alami. This is what they do to show in a strident way the authorship they have. The Pilgrimage Church of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary and so on, 1707, 1710. This is almost like a palace, but it has a church. Here you see some of the plans that he worked with. And there is something, you know, I mean, they are not static. They are alive and even somehow iconoclastic in a way. There is some kind of erotism here, I feel, in these plans. Another monastery, that's all he built, you know, churches, monasteries. But the ceiling is so very different from, you know, churches in Western Europe. Those astute triangles make all the difference, derived as they are from a liking that he seemed to have towards stars. And here, yes, welcome to the spiral. But we'll arrive at other pictures. I have other pictures, some of them very nice without the identifying marks of the authors. Here we have, you know, the Baroque here manifests itself maybe without the grandeur of Bernini. It's more domestic, but also somehow a little more sweet. Although the sweetness could be challenged a little bit by these triangles here, which are almost like spikes. But look at this parapet. It is really filigrammed. Is embroidered. It's like a curtain of some metal and fragments of a curtain. You know, it's nice. It's almost textile in a way. And look at this picture. Sorry again for the download from dreamstime.com, whatever that means. This is indeed a swirling spiral, swirling to the very end or the very beginning of everything. I love this picture too. It's incredible, really. This is cosmos. We are already off the Earth. We are, you know, maybe on some kind of celestial machinery that Elon Musk built, and we are flying, I don't know towards what. And look at this. Of course, these are just pictures. They are photographs, but they are photographs of a part of a building. And look at this. Now, I don't know how this was done. You know, I have a hard time to imagine that that's exactly what he built. But if this is exactly what he built, it's incredible. I mean, for our time, it would have been very credible. But for that time, 300 years ago, it's quite amazing. Talking about the deformations that come about thanks to fluidity. Another monastery church, another Assumption of Virgin Mary, this one quite developed and mature in its artistic manifestation. And look at the plan, not bad. Complex, rich, although the outside it is as it is, but the inside is quite impressive. The star again, you know, he likes stars. He likes stars on the floor. He likes stars on the ceiling. Another monastery church, reconstruction. Now, I don't know if he did these sculptures as well. I doubt it. You know, he died at 46. He did a lot. I wouldn't blame him if he didn't do the sculptures. A pilgrimage church of the name of the Virgin Mary in this place, 1718. You know, they are not very large churches. And look at the plan. And it has a clarity. Now, these drawings are contemporary, but still, yeah, the Czechs took care of his buildings, and they also took care of archiving the drawings by redrawing them and so on. Good for them. I can't read this, unfortunately, with the exception of the word chateau, which is not in the language. But here we have 3 cubes, you know, connected by that round thing in the center. It's the composition, if you look at the plan, is almost modern somehow. Well, the image from the outside is not so modern, I agree. But seen from the air, the idea to dislocate or to separate 3 cubes in this way is almost modern. The architectural expression is not, but the way he manipulated the volumes is to an extent. Another church, another reconstruction. Um, Almost any building looks good near such a lake, near such a piece of water. It's true, water saves architecture. And the Chinese know something about this because in contemporary uh, buildings, China is often bringing in water in somehow similar ways. It doesn't matter the architect was Alvaro Siza or not. The Church of St. Peter and Paul, I think I have only the plan for this one. I couldn't find the picture. No, I'm wrong. There is another one where I only have the plan. Um, Very well kept, really, these buildings. And they are 300 years old, so they are not so new at all. Another church, another plan. Church of the, there I only had the plan. Church of the Assumption of Virgin Mary in Latin. This one, I think, yeah, I couldn't find pictures, nor plans. The Provost Church of St. Peter and Paul, I couldn't find. I know for 3 or 4 buildings, I couldn't find pictures. I'm sorry. This one we already saw with the unusual 5-fold architecture. But here you see one of the original plans and a view of the ceiling, and this plan you already saw. Now, reconstruction of a house in Prague, which he did, and you'll see a Medusa here, not Bernini's Medusa. It's right here, and you'll see a detail a bit above the entrance. And this is the building, is a fine building, so almost 300 years old in Prague, that this architect built. He was an important Czech architect, no doubt. And here it is, the Medusa. Maybe one day we should talk just about Medusa, about its symbolism or her symbolism. And it would be a discussion we would invite also Dr. Freud to. So this is the building. And now I'll end the presentation, the short presentation on this architect with 3 or 4 diagrams of the plans, because I find them very relevant to his world. And you know, if I compare this plan with a plan by let's say Alberti, we see 2 very different kinds of architects. He was not really working in Italy, he was working in from Czechoslovakia, but art again doesn't have frontiers. And we see a turmoil here, this vortex of forces. Now these circles, I'm sure, were not done by him. These are graphic speculations of those who contemplate his works. But there seems to be a turmoil here, a vortex, a swirling passion for going deeper and deeper, higher and higher, and lower somehow into the mystery of the world and the mystery of life and the mystery of art. Thank you. And now, I don't know, let's see if there's still someone here. Oh my God, I'm impressed. 1, 2, 3, and we even have someone from Italy, Claudia. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. What we could do, if you want, so because I want to, in a way, to make up for the guilt of not truly doing enough, neither for Bernini nor for the Czech architect. Okay. So, Frank Gehry. Why Frank Gehry today? It is not his birthday, but it is Bernini's birthday. And because Frank Gehry was inspired by Bernini, at least this is what he declared, I chose to talk about him as well. I will show a number of his works, and he did build a lot. I will start in a way with with a more recent work, the Arles Tower in France. It is in Arles in France, and here I don't have pictures with a finalized work, or I think I don't, but I like the viscerality of this work in progress, which is very, you know, visceral. I already used the word visceral. I'm sorry, I am a little bit tired. Sorry. It is this fragmentation stirs me up because it is about multiplicity and unity, and it is also, in a way, I think here in the work not yet completed, Frank Gehry is superior to some of his finalized works. Now, the Pierre Boulez Concert Hall in Berlin, which is a more, it's not really, or it seems to be not really a typical Frank Gehry, certainly not that deconstructivist that he was in, I don't know, 1889 or 1991, 1992, at the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where he exhibited together with Peter Eisenman, Rem Koolhaas, Frank Gehry, not Frank Gehry, Zaha Hadid, Daniel Libeskind, Kop Himmelblau, and who else? There are 7, I always forget the 7th. So again, I shouldn't start with Frank Gehry. I usually start with someone else. Let's say Daniel Libeskind, Zaha Hadid, Rem Koolhaas, Peter Eisenman, Frank Gehry, Kop Himmelblau, and I still left one out. Anyway, it's okay. This building is less typical deconstructivist work, but Frank Gehry is also not, well, he is in some works so-called deconstructivist, but the deconstructivists also evolved in a way. So, you know, there are fluidities here that somehow belong to a different architectural language, not per se to deconstruction. Although his drawing, you know, is still based on that, you know, scribbling that is so often associated with drawings of at least some deconstructivists. Like Wolf Prix. Wolf Prix, for example, declared that at the beginning, when he was working with his partner and friend, they were closing their eyes. They never read the program, the architectural program. They just exploded with their closed eyes on paper. And then at one moment, they opened their eyes and they tried to make sense of that, you know, scribbling, that doodle. And when they were lucky, that became a building, and that's how that well-known penthouse they built, which was considered the first deconstructivist work, came into being. But now we are with Frank Gehry, which you see, Frank Gehry didn't stop experimenting, and I think this is a testimony to the usefulness of this man, who at over 90, he still experiments, he still builds, and he still provokes. After all, Fondation Louis Vuitton in Paris is a rather recent building, and it is incredible. I had been there without great expectations, and I hope I have pictures here with it. Now, I don't quite understand this gesture coming from him, because here we have a highly accomplished man at all levels, applauded, admired. Some ridicule him. I know, I met such people. Even at Columbia University in New York, not everybody was convinced about his architecture. Yet maybe he's making that gesture towards them. It's possible. But he's not as simplistic as some people might try to attempt to describe him. On the other hand, Wolf Prix, when he was asked to give the names of the 5 people, of 5 architectures that any student of architecture or architect should see, must see, He said, the Egyptian pyramids, the temple of Hera in Paestum, the Bilbao Guggenheim Museum by Frank Gehry, Boeing, I don't know, 747. So he included a plane between the five buildings, four buildings in this case, and the fifth, the church he built himself for Martin Luther in the town where he was born. Later on, he denied that he mentioned Paestum. I asked him myself, but that's what I saw published. And I know why he denied, because Paestum, the temple of Hera in Paestum, is a pre-Doric building, quite so-called heavy, but that telluric force makes you fly, so to speak, paradoxically through imagination. Anyway, this is a fragment of the building, and you see here he's experimenting also with different textures of the building, so it's fine. Gehry is not stuck. He's not totally stuck in a maniera. So we see other pictures of that building in Arles, and it's interesting. During the construction, it was finalized, and I don't think I have here pictures with it, but it's very close to what you see here. And it's not, I don't know about this base. Personally, I think maybe I'm a purist, maybe I'm too dogmatic, but somehow I don't have a feeling that this goes with this. Not even in an oxymoronic way, but that's not what he thought. And the one who counts here is obviously not me. Anyway, but it is, I think, a building that shows Gehry's ability to address a form of building which is almost medieval in spirit. You know, it's a tower. It's a tower that grows, you know, and it's made of a multitude of fragments. It is visceral, as I said, and it is imperfect also. Imperfection was welcomed or unavoidable in the Middle Ages. Anyway, one thing is for sure, something like this you could not build with using traditional means of, unless you descend into the 12th century, where you put a stone above another stone and so on. That would, you know, stir up the imagination and the admiration of John Ruskin much later. But here we are dealing with a powerful technology. Frank Gehry is very well equipped. Is NASA in Los Angeles. He has all the softwares and the skillful people to work with, so he can do anything. And maybe this should provoke us, you know, if we are in that part of the world which still imagines that we can continue to work with a T-square and a rectangle. I don't think we can, unless we are severely confronted with the climate change and even with the need to shut off all kinds of artificial energy that we created and so on, which might be a possibility. I hope not, but it could happen. I don't know. I always had some question marks about Gehry's pop side, so to speak. There is a pop side to him, and it's obvious even in the Bilbao Museum, the Guggenheim Museum. Sometimes he's able to avoid a tangible or you know, intimate relationship between certain parts of his building and that pop Californian mentality that seems to be unavoidable there. Even in La Fondation Louis Vuitton, and we arrived at it, and I had visited this building, and I didn't go with great expectations, but when I arrived at the top, I was very, very, very impressed, because unbelievable things happened there, and you'll see some of them. This, I mean, here we are, you know, we saw the Medusa's head by Bernini. We saw the Medusa in the case of the Czech architect. We see Medusa here. We see the snakes of architecture. These are architectural snakes, which are have an unbelievable complexity and scale. I mean, here is something else. The colors do not belong. These things belong to Daniel Burin, a French artist. This was just a kind of a temporary installation. I guess, I don't know, some people felt the need for some color. When I was there, this didn't exist, but I wasn't, I wouldn't, I didn't miss really what Daniel Burin did here. Not that what he did is wrong. I'm not saying this. It's just that I think the building by Frank Gehry is complex enough and rich enough. And unfortunately, there are parts which I cannot show here because I don't know where the pictures I took, and many of them failed, are. But you'll still see certain details of this building. It's also a spider's web. I mean, look at this. You know, Frank Gehry was obsessed and is obsessed by the fish. And the fish is a Christian symbol, and he's not Christian. But for some reason, he loves the fish. And I imagine also the symbolism of the fish. But here I also see the spider. And look at this. Look at the scale of these structural elements. They're huge. And we see the human beings here trying to put together these things. Look at the incredible angles. These are curved. They are not straight. Look at this joint. And it's one of many. I mean, it is mad and it is also beautiful. And I was here and I have to say, I couldn't stop taking pictures. It is breathtaking. You could say it's a show. It's an extravaganza, a bonanza. No, it's more to it. It's an imago mundi. This is what it is, in as much as the snakes of Medusa are an imago mundi. Again, it is absolutely impossible to do something like this without using the technology that Frank Gehry does use. I mean, it is an architectural event just here, just in this joint. And there are so many, and they're all different. Bravo to them. Bravo to the builders who risk their lives to do this. Bravo to the architect. Bravo to the people who help him. Bravo to even to the so-called client, because it required participation and courage from everybody. Sorry, look at this. You know, it's impossible to be there and have a camera on you or a mobile phone and not take pictures. Why? Because like a child, you'll search for it in your bag or in your pocket to take pictures, whatever it is, a camera or a mobile phone, because it is impressive. And it's not everywhere like this, the building, but there on the top is. It is a spider's work. It is a web. It is the web of contemporaneity. This is what it is. It is not a linear, placid world any longer. It's a knot. It's a knot of the present. We are all in this knot together, the terrestrial knot. Look at this joint. You know, I think it's magnificent. And it's just a so-called detail. But to bring together all these parts, it's not easy at all in terms of, building it, not just sketching. His sketches are almost irrelevant here. It's the army of people who help him to realize his vision with exactitude, with rigor. And yes, towards the outside, I like it more the inside, but also the outside is a work that I don't think it leaves you indifferent. So Fondation Louis Vuitton, yes, I cannot forget that this foundation makes money with the abnormally expensive bags. I mean, I know Rem Koolhaas, made fun of Bono, the singer of that group, U2, because he made some advertisings for a certain bag. But the truth of the matter is you know, fashion is very very much part of it has a complicity with architecture, or architecture complicity with fashion. And Rem Koolhaas himself is not a stranger to this, considering his collaborations, extensive collaborations with Prada. Anyway, look at this. Medusa's head in architecture. Yeah, that's what it is. And I had better pictures than these, but these are not mine. Mine, I took so many. Unfortunately, I didn't use very well my camera, but I still have some interest. I'll show them some, with another occasion. In Panama, a very different building because uses copiously powerful, vivid colors. And look at this. Gehry again, unafraid to use primary colors. And in Panama is, I guess, even more appropriate or required. It's really, yes, for example, because we ended that presentation on the second architect in Prague. Well, he also built, as you know, a building in Prague, Frank Gehry, which doesn't really express so much joie de vivre, although some people think it is a dancing building. I think this one expresses some kind of a joy more, mainly because of the colors. And I feel even the flowers seem to enjoy the building. Now, a Bart Fischer Center, the typical, well, now the typical Frank Gehry, fluidities and deformations that he's so well known for. In a way, he went, I mean, I would be very curious to know what Bernini would have thought of Frank Gehry, but we could never find out. But what is important, I think, to say is this. There are some centuries between Bernini and Frank Gehry, but essentially art has no frontiers, neither in space nor in time. So there is a continuity on the spiral of time. And that's why I think it's so important not to neglect what is called the past. Although, in my opinion, there is a certain so-called past which didn't pass. And it is exactly that so-called past which is so very relevant. Because you can get inspired and provoked and sustained by someone like Bernini or by someone like Alberti, as Eisenman now at 88 finds great interest in Alberti. And this is why it hurts me so much that many young and not so young people do not understand that this is not about the pedantic aspects of accumulating culture. This is really about belonging to your time, but without losing anything of the so-called past. Even Nietzsche said, in Zarathustra, I think he said, to pour everything into the mold, meaning to forget nothing, to expect. I am tired and I apologize. To erase nothing, to pour everything into the mold. It's important to connect with what preceded us that didn't die, and Bernini didn't die. And it's not just Bernini. I forgot who will follow tomorrow. Tomorrow it will be another celebration. I'll find out after this one ends. Anyway, this is a hotel, a Dionysian hotel in Spain, where, of course, the architect himself and the builders themselves and the people who helped the architect drank some wine from those wineries, because that's what they do there. It is an intoxicated building. Unfortunately, intoxicated and intoxicating. Unfortunately, the interior is not so good. In fact, just like in the case of Daniel Lipskind, some of the interiors are, especially when they are domestic, somehow like here, bedrooms, hotel rooms. You will see. I hope I have some pictures. You'll understand what I'm talking about. It's not any longer the same spirit. It's the same of, is the spirit of, if there is such a thing as the spirit of comfort. It's very bourgeois, very petit bourgeois, but outside the building is not. Well, let's not get too exalted here. Some parts are indeed exalted and intoxicated and intoxicating. But here is the problem with Frank Gehry, where he introduces two systems. I'm not against oxymorons, I'm not against paradoxes. I like them. I even try to promote them or cultivate them. But I don't think he truly unites the opposites, as the alchemist would say. It's not a sufficiently obtained conjunctio oppositorum. This is my opinion. This is simply too literally, rectangular, too explicitly so, and it's not a perfect balance or marriage. But I understand the difficulty of what he was doing. It is difficult what he attempted and what he attempts. But the grapes, I think the grapes in the winery are probably intrigued and maybe even happy. Now, the Guggenheim, sorry, I didn't have pictures of the interior. I regret, but maybe with another presentation. I have several actually on Frank Gehry, and it's possible I didn't pick up the one that is more complex. The Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao that I mentioned, this one I visited, and what can I say? Here again, it is an interesting and challenging work, but I still think a little bit of the Californian pop is a little bit too much present in some parts, not not everywhere. It is still a destination, no doubt. And if you are in Spain, it would be regrettable not to go and see it in Bilbao. It took courage, in as much as it took courage to Louis Bourgeois to make this great spider, this arachne representation in front of the building. I love Louis Bourgeois, and I think the spider is worthy of our attention again. And through the spider, weaving and the web, of course. We talk about the web. Well, what is the web? What could the web be without a spider? It's not an accident that it was a woman who did that spider, and that it is in front of this building by Frank Gehry. It's not just in front of this building. She did several versions of this spider, and they are in front of other museums and other places. But I like it here. Um, Well, people are afraid of spiders because spiders are evoking the road not taken. And I would say is the road of Arachne, who was defeated by Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, that sprang from the head of Zeus, armed already and without a mother. This is truly something worthy of attention. The conflict between Athena and Arachne, and the fact that Arachne was punished by Athena and transformed into a spider and relegated to the dark corners of existence. I think we should remember Arachne again. Uh, anyway, Bilbao, one of the five so-called buildings, because one was a plane mentioned by Wolf Prix when asked five must-see buildings, and this was one of them, in his opinion. I would not have necessarily included neither the plane nor this one, maybe, but it could be there too. But there are other buildings that are at least as important as this one. But it is an important building. He did bring something new to architecture and to the world through this building. The metallic fish, the initial sketch. It saved the city of Bilbao. Culture can also be lucrative. Because of it, Bilbao became an important destination for cultural tourism, and it grew richer in the process. Now, I don't know about this giant puppy by Jeff Koons. but that's not the work of or the decision of Frank Gehry. Here is Louise Bourgeois with her inciting with the inciting spider. So today is the birthday of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, but by the way of Bernini, we look at some contemporary works that claim that to an extent were inspired by the great Baroque architect. I myself organized once an exhibition in 2017 in Vienna called Angst Baroque, with 7 diploma works of 7 postgraduate well, students, actually architects who studied in Vienna from various countries. Was an interesting little exhibition. The beginnings, his own house, if you know it, in California. It took him a little bit of time to assert himself, and he did some works. Actually, I have seen early works by Frank Gehry, which were not were far from what we would call today deconstruction. But the first deconstructivist work that he did was here in his own house, and it's mainly it's a fragment actually above the kitchen, but is the sign of what was to follow in a way. Here he is, I guess, with his son, leaving his house. You know, he is Canadian. He was born in Canada, but made his home in Los Angeles. And it was a good move. It's possible that if he remained in Canada, he would not have arrived at the level of architectural extravagance he arrived at on the East Coast. This is a museum in Germany, a little bit less known, although people stay in line there to enter it. Sorry for the pictures, don't have the resolution, the optimal resolution, but you can still see it. There is a level of the ludic here, homo ludens. I do agree with Johann Huizinga that we need playing when we create. Play is very important in creation. And Huizinga differentiated between game and play. It is, even linguistically, a difference between game and play. Play is more easily connected with culture and with creativity in the serious sense of the word. Now, the ludic aspects of the work of Frank Gehry sometimes, and then this is my subjective thought and opinion, is not, it doesn't arrive at that depth and even gravity. I think true creation is ludic. It's playful, but it's about that seriousness, as Jean Nouvel said, the seriousness of a child that loses himself in the act of playing. To arrive at that seriousness is not easy, but you can play, but not always you arrive at that forgetting oneself that a child arrives at when he plays. I don't know if I expressed well what I wanted to express. Here I see a little bit of maniera, a little bit, I'm not sure Frank Gehry was totally without some kind of self-consciousness here. I don't think he was. Plus there is I understand that architecture flirts with fluidity, flirts with a textile, flirts with a fabric, but when architecture begins to transform what is supposed to be three-dimensional into two-dimensional, although I'm sure some so-called, some spaces are so-called interesting, but look at the walls, they lose the gravity and the force, the weight of a world that is aware and even celebrates through some kind of contrast gravity. Here, the wall is almost like paper. It became paper. And this, to me, is a little bit problematic. But still, there are positive things here. The building seen from above, we still see the duality. A building that a part of the building that is rectangular, and another one that is, the signature Frank Gehry. There are another museum in Minneapolis. He builds so much, Of course, he stirs up people even in a negative way, because there is also envy. Of course, any architect would like to build as much as he builds. Someone told me that he still keeps a CV, and it has tens of pages. Now, why would he need a CV? Because he doesn't search for a job, obviously, nor does he search any longer for clients. Anyway, let him keep a CV. When I was told this, he had about 28 pages, his CV, but this was a number of years ago. Anyway, his buildings are shining, they are fragmented, but they are fragmented not everywhere. Here there is fragmentation, here not at all. And I think what he does and do is not what he did and does is not so different from other architects do in the public manifested in the corners of the buildings that are publicly invested with a certain function, meaning with a function having to do with the public. There, yes, the exuberance is encouraged to manifest itself as it does. But in other parts, it is less necessary so. Another sketch from 1990, the fish that I mentioned, he is enamored by the fish. And this is an aspect of his work that even in terms of spirituality, perhaps should be addressed. The Dizzy Bank in Berlin, which is across the street from the Holocaust memorial by Peter Eisenman. I like what I see inside in this courtyard, but from the outside, the building has an appreciable reticence, which was maybe required by the clients, but he's very courageous what he did inside. He knows when to push the limits. As Elizabeth Diller said, the trick is, I don't like the word trick, but she used it. The trick is to be outrageous, but not offensive. And Frank Gehry is very close to being offensive, but he knows when to stop. So I think that's what he did. He's outrageous, but almost offensive, but not offensive. It's difficult to be outrageous but not offensive. Very, very difficult. I have troubles to arrive at that level. Anyway, another interesting building by Frank Gehry, this time in Berlin. And this is how the building looks like from the outside. And as I said, just across the street is the Holocaust memorial by Peter Eisenman. And it might be that this is the last picture in this presentation about Frank Gehry. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for being patient with me.